everybody, here we are again. Your wishes are fulfilled. That third wish, I hope it was worth it because your two dads is back. We're going to talk to you about something near and dear to my heart, something that I thought I was getting a handle on. Today, it's kind of giving me trouble. So it's appropriate that we're going to talk about it in an interview format with a past guest. We appreciate AC coming back and sharing his wisdom again. This time, he's going to tell me how I can take that next step into absolute mental toughness and how I can guarantee that I pass that on to my kid. So, once again, I do appreciate you joining us, AC. And if you want to, go ahead and remind everybody who you are.
No, I'm happy to be back. I really, really appreciate the invitation. For those of you who missed it last time, I'm host of a podcast called In the Blood. I focus on how our relationship with self affects our relationship with others. I am also a personal empowerment coach. What that means is, we all got stuff that we need to deal with. I just try to ask questions and make suggestions to help you deal with that a little bit better. If you want to learn more about me, uh, you know, just check out the last time I was on this show. They'll probably tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah, if you need to know more than that, you need to listen to the episode because he gives you all the details you need to get started on finding him and hooking up that probably very prosperous relationship. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and kick it into the main thrust of the conversation, and that is, of course, how you got mentally tough. So let's start off there. How do you think, as a youth, as a teen, as an adult, how did you develop mental toughness?
That's not the most straightforward question to answer. I mean, when you told me what the topic of today's show was going to be, I had a lot of thoughts on the matter. And I thought, well, just on the surface, getting treated like crap all through childhood, I thought had toughened me up. I learned not to cry about things that most kids would have cried about. I learned how to duck a punch. You know, I learned how to develop a thick skin when the other kids gave me a hard time at school. And I thought that that's what was tough, what toughness looked like. What I realized is it toughness, I don't think really started to develop in me until I learned to let down those barriers and become a little bit more vulnerable. Because I mean, I think when you throw up these walls, these things that most people would like see as being tough, that's actually a fairly weak move because what you're saying is I can't handle these things. I need to insulate myself from them. Real toughness comes when you learn how to safely expose yourself and become vulnerable. And that's something, in all honesty, like I don't think that's a process that ever really ends. I think that's something that I've been continually working on for many, many years, and I would assume will continue to do so.
Okay, well, that's both encouraging and discouraging because I really did think I had a handle on my anxiety, but man, today it's just I've got something kind of important to take care of after this, and it's just weighing heavily on me. I'm really trying to do my best to stay present, to stay focused on just exactly what's in front of me and not dwell on it. But at the same time, you know, your words in terms of it being a process and as opposed to a set destination, that does make me feel better because it's not like I had a setback necessarily. It's just a bump in the road of mental toughness. I've had y- 4 people, counting you, that I've talked to about this, and I started off this kind of mini series because I had a couple of people die, and that really exaggerated my level of anxiety, and I was beginning to wonder if that was due to some sort of lack in on my part somehow or another. And so I'm wondering, trying he tried to transition as smoothly as possible. I'm wondering, when you come up on a stressful situation, a stressful period, extended period of time, whatever it may be, how do you kind of keep a level head? How do you retain your calmness, for lack of a better way of putting it?
Anxiety is something I'm very, very familiar with. I deal with general anxiety disorder. I have panic attacks, depression, just like that whole host of mental challenges that come along with, when you're a little bit smarter than average, that does come with crippling anxiety. Talking to you in the past, I think you would easily fit into that category. you know, Enjoy the high IQ and like the
You get this as well.
nonstop anxiety that comes along with it, right?
Yeah.
But how I've learned to deal with it, and I didn't even realize that there was a label for it until just the last week, is I've been, I guess, taking the DIY approach to something that's called dialogue therapy. And a large component of that is learning how to externalize whatever the problem is. Like we all know what it's like to internalize, with the anxiety. It's like you sort of like you're trying to push things deep inside, keep them down where they're not going to like pop up and give you a hard time. But that upward pressure, you're trying to push them down, they're pushing up much stronger. That's what the anxiety is. Like you're losing that struggle with whatever the thing is. And what I've learned to do over the last few years is like, you know what, if that thing wants to come out, well, let's take it out. But instead of looking at it as a stressful influence, like this emotional state, I've almost turned it into like a conscious entity, right? And like if you're dealing with, well, you're focus of this whole show, right? You're two dads. You're a dad. I'm a dad. We understand what it's like. You're dealing with your kid. Your kid some days is going to take everything you got and then some. Your kid is infuriating. There's days where it's like you're at the end of the rope. I don't know if I can deal with this little prick anymore, right? I mean, that's like a day in the life of a dad. It happens. But you're not going to like try to shove your kid deep down somewhere. You're not going to try to like put him under the rug, lock him in a closet. At least I would hope not.
Mhm.
You're going to figure out, how do I navigate this little bastard in a way that like works for both of us? And I think dealing with our anxiety, we got to do it the same way. It's like, okay, I don't like the feelings that come out of cohabitating this mental space with this anxious state. I don't like the thoughts and feelings that come as a result of spending time with this thing. But when I look at it more like as a difficult person, like a difficult, unavoidable person, like a kid or a coworker or a spouse, I learned that, you start looking for the things that work in the thing that doesn't work. Like you start looking for redeeming quality. It's like, okay, like for maybe like a really surface level example, I don't like that feeling in the pit of my stomach, that nonstop adrenaline that comes with the anxiety. What I can appreciate is the superpower that comes along with like that hyper awareness that is a byproduct of the anxiety. I'm seeing things that other people are missing. It's like I've got this whole extra field of view. And when I start focusing on these highlights rather than focusing on like the actual physical sensation, I start seeing the anxiety as a strength as much as it is a weakness. And the strength and the weakness, they have a funny way of canceling each other out to the point where, it becomes very, very manageable.
That that's really that sounds like it might be really helpful. I like the idea of not dwelling like in general in life. I like the idea of just trying not to dwell in the negative, trying to find the positive wherever you can. And if you can find a positive like that in the anxiety, I see that being helpful in combating it or dealing with it, whatever verb you want to use. I'm wondering. I want to run down, and I'm not saying that your words will necessarily sway how I approach this, but I wanted to get your take on how I do things, at least in terms of dealing with the anxiety. I've kind of used a Zen Stoic process where I will, at least as far as I can determine, do everything I can, make whatever decisions and actions I can in terms of reaching a resolution. And then after that, when inevitably the anxiety returns and tries to get me to go back and just reverbalize everything I just said in my mind and pick over it all again needlessly, I will try to then, uh, you know, really focus on being present, really focus on like simple things like how my shoes or how my feet feel in my shoes or how my shirt's fitting or the temperature around me, things that really I can't help but be right now in this moment. And like I said, up till now, I was bragging about it. I was like, this is working perfectly. But today, the anxiety, having something I have to make a phone call after this and having that like kind of hanging over my head. And not like it's life or death, and I don't want to, bore the listeners with it, but it's an anxious situation I got to deal with. That really has me kind of questioning my tactics, my techniques. Do you think that I'm on the right path? Like, there's many paths, obviously, but am I on a right path with this, or is today a sign that like this is not necessarily going to be a successful way to deal with this?
Okay, so if you were one of my clients, what I would tell you is just because something isn't working today doesn't mean you need to give up on it. It doesn't mean it's not working in general. I mean, every moment's going to have different demands of you, right? Every day is going to have different demands. You're in a different space mentally, one day to the next. You find yourself in different environments, dealing with different people, different to-do lists. And if today this approach that typically works for you isn't working, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of room to maybe try a different approach when you're in this moment. Like, we all have different tools in our box that we use for approaching different tasks, right? Like, again, like I like using stupid examples because I think stupid examples is things people can relate to. Like if I got to go hang a picture on the wall, you know what? I can drive a nail into the wall using like the heel of my wife's shoe. Like, that's going to get the job done. If I'm framing a new shed in the backyard, well, that's not the time to be banging nails with a shoe. That's the time to go grab my hammer, you know? I think dealing with your mental challenge is the same thing. There's times where it's like this passive approach, like this is awesome. Just wiggling your toes inside your shoes, splashing some water on your face, like adjusting the temperature in the room. These are wonderful things. There's other times where it's like, you know what? There's nothing wrong with sticking your face in a pillow and screaming F bombs at the top of your lungs until you get all out of your system. It doesn't define who you are as a person. It just helps you navigate the moment, and that's totally okay.
That's cool. That is a good example in terms of the shoe versus the hammer because they both work. They both have theoretically they both have their place in terms of banging against things. And but there is a time where one isn't going to be enough. So for me, I thought like this technique I had this whole combined little way of dealing with things. I thought that was the only tool I needed. But in reality, it's just one of the tools that I need. And sometimes, like today, for example, that's not necessarily going to be the end all be all when it comes to dealing with this. So I'm feeling a little better already. It's good that I've got a couple of things here that give me encouragement in terms of my own life. But I was wondering, for you personally, do you have any, and I would take away from this as well, but do you have anything that you've used or anything that springs to mind when you've tried to, share this sort of mental, I keep saying mental toughness for lack of a better way of putting it, but just this level-headedness? What have you done to try and share this with your kids?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing that I've done with my kids is, and I've gotten a lot of flack for this over the years from different people, is I try to be as transparent as humanly possible because struggle is just part of the human experience. Struggle is unavoidable. We all have tough days. We all have tough moments. We all have those things that make us want to just say, like, F it, I'm giving up. I can't do this. I can't handle it. There's things that'll drive us to our knees in tears, right? And it's not like I want my kids to see me like weak all the time, but I don't want them to see me strong all the time either. Like, if I have a bad moment, like say something comes up, and normally I'm a very level-headed person, I'm an even-tempered person 95% of the time. I have my moments where I'm a right prick. It happens, right? We all have our breaking point. And if I hit my breaking point and my kids happen to know about it, I don't want them to think, you know what, it's okay. Dad was justified. I'll just tell them, look, I'm not proud of that moment. I'm not making excuses for it. I will explain that this is what drove me here. Here's where, in retrospect, maybe I could have steered things in a better direction. Maybe I should have reached out for help sooner. Maybe I should have, I don't know, just shared transparently instead of like worrying about rocking the boat, and just said, look, this is bothering me. I can't handle this right now. Y'all need to give me a little bit of space. But when they see that I'm not like processing in secret, they see like the whole thing. They understand like the steps I'm taking, It's not like I'm teaching them to follow those steps exactly. I'm showing them that each of us has a process. We need to be aware of it. Being aware of it is helpful. And when we find what works for us, it's like, you know what? You're not looking at this big, homogenous, massive problem. What you're looking at is one step at a time. Like when I don't know about you, I'm like a bit of a car guy. I like turning wrenches. And a lot of times people come to me and say, well, how do you know how to do all this stuff under the hood? And I was like, can you turn a wrench? Can you loosen or tighten the bolt? Well, yeah. I mean, what kind of idiot can't do that? But that's all it is one bolt after another. I mean, yeah, there's a bit of know-how as far as where the bolts go, what order they go in, but our mental health is the same thing. It's like one little thing at a time. You don't have to solve all the world's problems with one transaction. You can say, you know what? There's a million things bothering me today. I'm going to start with the fact that I don't like my shoelaces, you know?
Yeah. That's very Buddhist, where it's like, worry about, first of all, worry about yourself. And then, it could be as simple as, like you just did, you're thirsty, take a drink of water. Like, that's the base root, start there, and then, let everything else kind of follow. I don't want to simplify it like too broadly, but I feel like your technique, your way of sharing your well, wisdom, your level-headedness. I feel like it's kind of just a natural effect of you being honest. You're brave enough, strong enough, whatever you want to call it, to be honest with your kids, and then the very act of doing that and explaining to them that, like, teaches them, okay, well, my dad is, he can deal with these things because of this. He can't deal with this because of that, but he's working on it, and that's how life is, and I'm gonna work on it. And so you don't like, and there may be times where you're like, hey, this is this, and this is how you do this, and da da da. But it seems like for the most part, you're just kind of teaching by example and honesty.
Yeah. And I think it's great that you actually honed in on the honesty component. And I don't think it's an simplification at all because it's amazing how many good things will find their roots in honesty and transparency. Like, and not the least of which being our own personal stress levels. When we're trying to be something that we're not, our headspace is immediately polluted. Like I'm pretty good at being me. If I tried to be you, I'd suck at it. That would be a stressful and horrible experience. But I mean, for you, it'd be the opposite. I would imagine you do pretty good being Corey. You'd suck at being AC. No problem there.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes
But
it's all I
I
can
think
do to be Corey.
right. But I think like a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that like you don't really know what's expected of Corey because maybe like you haven't spent enough time clearly defining like, okay, who and what am I? Like, what is my role in this situation? I mean, quite often we find ourselves trying to play a character rather than to just be ourselves. And a lot of that has to do with, I think there's a bit of dishonesty that's woven into things like political correctness. There's a bit of dishonesty woven into trying to maintain an upbeat, healthy mood between husband and wife, father and child, and whatnot. It's like we're so conditioned to try to like maintain whatever okay is that we kill ourselves in the process.
Yeah, I totally, like, I wouldn't have been able to put that in words, but yeah, there is a kind of I won't call it a preconceived notion, but we always go into those things with, like, trying to make the best of it, trying to look only on the bright side, and like, really avoiding the negative at all costs. And that's not, you got to take the good with the bad, like yin and the yang. So that is that's really, I don't know. I want to say helpful. I'm gonna, I feel better now having talked to you just this brief amount of time. I feel like, though, that I'm gonna, press end. We're gonna say our goodbyes, and then I'm gonna be like, oh, there's that anxiety in the pit of my stomach again. So I'm wondering, just you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but do you kind of can you put a kind of let's say, for example, let's put it this way. Let's say I want to learn more about how you kind of treat um, like everyday philosophy, mental toughness, just like, some like me, for example, I'm very big in Zen Stoicism. Other people might be big in Christianity, or, God forbid, I don't know why. But, some people might be like Jungians or what have you. What do you consider your way of thought? Do you have is there like an overarching title that you would call it?
I mean, I find that most of my philosophies are rooted in Tibetan Buddhism. I spent a good portion of time immersed in, well, I hate to say that religion, it's more like a philosophy, immersed in that philosophy when I had exited Christianity, because I found like, whereas Christianity claims to have all the answers, it doesn't really offer any specifics, whereas the Buddhist way of doing things, it really seems to offer a lot of answers without claiming to offer a lot of answers, if that makes sense.
Actively not claiming, like really like saying, hey, I'm not claiming any of these answers, but here might be some answers.
But I just like, I don't know, I kind of like that whole approach of just always taking things back to basics, right? I mean, I don't really like labeling things if I don't have to, but I mean, even in that, I feel like not liking to stick a label on things still comes back to that Buddhist philosophy,
Yeah,
just taking things as they are. But yeah, I think, as I've already made pretty clear, it's just like if you just take things down to their base components. I mean, even if nothing else, but like if you don't know what to do, today is stressful, today is overwhelming, today sucks. I don't know how to approach the day. Okay, what do you know how to do? I know how to blink, I know how to breathe, I know how to swallow my spit. I mean, I know how to use the bathroom, I know how to drink water, like you pointed out earlier. It's like there's all these things I know how to do. Just start by immersing myself in these things that are comfortable and like that I don't give a second thought, and just introduce the complications a little bit at a time from there, built on that foundation of this is easy.
right on. And definitely take it more as a journey than as a destination, because there are going to be days where it seems, apparently, from what we've talked about, it seems like nothing works. And you just have to accept that and use whatever tools you have, and, fall back on the simple things, like you said, with controlled breathing, or, I know how to tie my shoes. I know how to go for a walk. I know how to read a book, and sometimes that's all you really can do, I guess. Um, I almost hate to end it on kind of that, like, not really a sour note, but like that really like tropic note where it's like, oh well, 4 episodes of mental toughness, and I'm sorry, I didn't really give you any answers. But at the same time, at least I do feel a little bit better in terms of not having a fear of missing out on the answer. There's not an answer. There's different tools that you have to use at different times and make the best of it. And I think that a couple things you said, as I mentioned, really will stick with me. The idea of trying to find the positive in the anxiety. That the you said something, I can't remember if it was the adrenaline maybe, but the anxiety really does give you like energy. Like,
Hmm.
when I'm at my most anxious, I'm like, man, I just really want to be doing something right now. Like, I feel like I have all this energy to burn off. And instead of looking at that as a negative, kind of look at that as, well, I need to go mow the yard, or I need to go do whatever. And, and I could use that to push me in. I guess that's really all you can hope for. To find, you're not going to find any answers in this world, people, but at least we gave you 4 episodes worth of techniques that may or may not help. And I think that, as I said, these things run kind of short. I don't want to harp too much on what is a very subjective thing. Mental toughness changes from person to person. So I just like to get some guests on. It's been really convenient because I've known all of you guys from previous interviews. So it was nice to kind of touch base again and see how things were, and hear your lovely voice one more time. And I do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on here and share your wisdom, and hopefully,
Well,
help
anytime.
help some people like you did me. Um, we will. You say anytime. I was just about to say we'll have to do it again sometime. I'm always on the lookout for extra ways to branch off and into different aspects of the show. So maybe we could do. I'm just spitballing here, brainstorming, but maybe we could do some sort of semi-regular mental health type of thing. That is one of the bases or bases, whatever, of the show. So it would be cool to have that like extra little content there for people to digest it, specifically about mental health. But that's something for another day. We might be able to talk about that sometime down the road. As I said, I'm just kind of spitballing here. But before we go, did you have anything to share? Any last pearls of wisdom for the folks?
Okay, just yeah, one last thing as far as management goes. One thing I learned from years of drinking is that when I get anxious or sad or like really anything, there's like that feeling would settle in the pit of my stomach. And I found like a good shot of some like sort of stiff liquor would really like numb that feeling. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody go out and develop an alcohol dependency, but what I've learned from that is that like things are connected, like as far as physical sensations with the mental. I've noticed with me when I get anxious, my skin feels very cold. So I notice like a hot shower or a hot bath, if I warm up that skin that is cooled by the anxiety, that warm skin tends to minimize the anxiety for me. I mean, if you pay attention to what your physical sensations are, try to address those physical sensations and then just feed that back into the mental stuff. You'll be surprised by what happens.
Wow, that's really cool. I was actually like, as you were speaking, I was like, so maybe like, because my skin gets kind of warm when I get anxious. So I was like, maybe a cold shower would work for me, or at least, turning on the cold water for a couple seconds. It's like really good. Also really good advice. So thank you for, I don't know, remembering that, adding it, whatever you want to call it. Once again, I took something away if no one else did. And really, this is my show, so I'm the one I care most about. Um,
Exactly. Screw the
so,
listeners.
yeah, I try to frame things to drive them away. As few listeners as possible. That's my goal. And if they stick around for long, then well, they're really truly fans.
Well, like you and me both, we're just clawing our way to the bottom of the podcasting world, right?
Yeah, we want to. I want to be the mud that everyone else is like struggling to get out of. I just want to be like, come down here with me in the doldrums, and we can spend time together. So I guess we'll go ahead and end it with that. I do once again appreciate you coming on. You've made me smile at a time when I was like really struggling and giving me some stuff to think about that will definitely be helpful. So I do appreciate that. And I guess we will talk again sometime soon.
Sounds awesome.
All right, you have a good rest of your weekend. I'll talk to you later.
You too, sir.